Okay, let's go. Hello, welcome to an adventure. I'm Anthony Wright de Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, aka Rogan27 here on the internet. And this is Archival Adventures. I hope that you're all having a good week. We've reached Wednesday, which means it's time for us to dig into the archives and see what there is. I'm hoping that our issues with audio levels and whatnot will be resolved from here on out. I have done some setup and everything, I think, should be in sync. So hopefully the audio levels that are here are correct and are identical over on the other channel. But if there are problems, please let me know. So let me see who else here. I see a Key Squared. Hi, Key Squared. May not be very chatty in chat today. Hey. Today we are looking at a short story in Pulp Speculative Fiction Magazine. So just think of it like you're listening to an audiobook, although not nearly as well performed. And hi, Lord Portico. I hit the soundboard with a rubber mallet. That should do it. Audio is audible. Woohoo! Yes, the finding aid announcement today. Strap in for a nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat adventure as we explore Ray Bradbury's Small Assassin in the spring 1951 issue of Suspense Magazine. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but because we're looking at historical items, and we're doing it from here, as in from Virginia Tech. Oh, look, I didn't even have all of my things turned on. I borrowed this scene to teach a class, so I had made the banner at the bottom go away. It's back now. That's fine. But since we're looking at historical items, we're here at the University Libraries at Virginia Tech. We always like to pay attention to the history of the place that we're at. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in Western territories. We understand that honoring Native peoples without explicit material commitments falls short of our institutional responsibilities. Through sustained, transparent, and meaningful engagement with the Tutelo and Monacan peoples and other Native nations, we commit to changing the trajectory of Virginia Tech's history by increasing Indigenous student, staff, and faculty recruitment and retention, diversifying course offerings, and meeting the growing needs of all Virginia tribes and supporting their sovereignty. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations. owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. We acknowledge that enslaved Black people generated wealth that financed the predecessor institution to Virginia Tech, the Preston and Olin Institute. They also worked on construction of its building. Not until 1953, however, was the first Black student permitted to enroll. Through inclusive VT, the institutional and individual commitment to ProSim that I may serve. In the spirit of community diversity and excellence, we commit to advancing a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. So, always good to keep that in mind and to revisit it every week when we start. But what we're going to do today is from Ray Bradbury. And most people probably already know Ray Bradbury, but we'll just take a peek at the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction and see what it has to say about Bradbury for anybody who might not know. Looks like he was alive from 1920 to 2012. U.S. screenwriter, poet, and author. In 1934, his father, a power lineman who was having trouble gaining employment in Michigan during the Depression, moved with the family to Los Angeles. Memories and images of Southern California would be central to Bradbury's work, though the small-town Midwest always remained important in his stories. Discovered sci-fi fandom in 1937, meeting Ray Harryhausen, Forrest J. Ackerman, and Henry Kuttner, began publishing his fanzine, Futuria Fantasia, in 1939. First professional sale was Pendulum with Harry Hess for Super Science Stories in November 41. Alright. So there's more there if you really want to dig into it. I'm curious about this transition here. It's talking about things is written, and then a paragraph starts, "The Martian Chronicles is an amazing work," except they haven't yet spoken about the Martian Chronicles. And so, if you don't know what they are, that's a very bold declarative statement. It's closely interwoven stories linked by recurring humans to colonize Mars. Let's just see. Oh gosh. This is talking about a US TV miniseries. That's not what I wanted. I want to know about the book. Was there a book? I don't know. We'll find out, because that's a thing we can do. We're on the internet. We're just gonna ask Wikipedia here to because I'm not certain that I know. I read so many Martian fiction things, I don't know for sure if I know this one. Science fiction fix-up novel, published in 1950 by Ray Bradbury, chronicles the exploration and settlement of Mars, the home of indigenous Martians, by Americans leaving a troubled Earth that is eventually devastated by nuclear war. Hi, Fluidan. Projects American society immediately after World War II into a technologically advanced future where the amplification of humanity's potentials to create and destroy have both miraculous and devastating consequences. Apocalyptic destruction of both Martian and human civilizations, both instigated by humans. Though there are no stories with settings at the catastrophes, Okay, I have never read any of his Martian Chronicles, it looks like. Cool. I will put them on my list. Oh, I see a thing. I see a thing that I need to point to. So, oh my gosh. Fluidan, thank you for subscribing. It weirdly did not tell me anything about the subscription. But thank you anyway. For whatever. There it is. Thank you for subscribing with Prime. 21 months. Amazing. It was very slow in giving me that info. So I see a thing here that I need to point to because, and I'll explain why. Fix-up novel. The Martian Chronicles is a fix-up novel consisting of previously published short stories, along with new short bridge narratives in the form of interstitial vignettes, intercalary chapters, and expository narratives. Okay. Interstitial vignettes, those would be like little stories that vignette is like a short story. It's a French loanword expressing a short and descriptive piece of writing that captures a brief period in time. More focused on vivid imagery and meaning than plot. Interstitial just means that it comes between. Come on, you've got to. Wow, it's not even gonna give me a preview of interstitial? We'll click on it just to. Oh, because it doesn't want to give anything. Anyway. I love this. Of, relating to, or situated in an interstice. That is not a useful definition. This one is a little more useful. Displayed when leaving one content page for another. I love that its definition is just situated in an interstice, which makes you have to look up interstice if you don't know it. A small opening or space between objects. So in this case, the object is one story, and next the objects would be two different stories. Anyway, so interstitial vignettes, intercalary chapters. Now this time I don't actually know this term. An intercalary chapter is a chapter in a novel or novella that is relevant to the theme, but does not involve the main characters or further the plot. Intercalary chapters often take the form of vignettes that offer a broader or alternative perspective to the experiences of the main character. Interesting. I did not know the term for that. I'm familiar with it as a thing used in storytelling. And then expository narratives is now often simply called exposition. The insertion of background information within a story or narrative. So, anyway. The Martian Chronicles may at first appear to be a planned short story cycle. However, Bradbury did not specifically write the Martian Chronicles as a singular work. Rather, its creation as a novel was suggested to Bradbury by a publisher's editor years after most of the stories had already appeared in many different publications. In response to the suggestion, the 29-year-old Bradbury was shocked by the idea that he had already written a novel and remembers saying, "Oh my God, I read Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson when I was 24, and I said to myself, oh God, wouldn't it be wonderful if someday I could write a book as good as this, but put it on the planet Mars." And that quote is the whole reason that I ended up reading all of that, because the Martian Chronicles are not the focus today. Hi, Hannah! The Martian Chronicles are not our main focus today. But I saw this quote and I had to read it. Because he mentions Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. And we have a ton of stuff in the archives by Sherwood Anderson. So, and we have many copies of Winesburg, Ohio in multiple languages. So I just had to, I had to read the part that referenced that because it's relevant to the archives here at Virginia Tech. Congratulations, Key Squared. You have been selected randomly as a VIP for the stream. Enjoy the extra little diamond next to your name in chat. Anyway, we are specifically looking today at The Small Assassin, and small indeed when you look at the size of the text on this screen. Let me increase this just a bit here. Okay, so we were looking at the science fiction encyclopedia, or the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. Now, however, we are looking at the Internet Science Fiction Database. Sorry, I was getting notifications in my Twitch and was like, what is this? So the difference being the encyclopedia page, there is not a specific encyclopedia page about the story, The Small Assassin. So the best I could do was the Ray Bradbury entry. But the Internet Science Fiction Database will list, quite often will list every instance of publication. And so in this case, we've got the title, the story, The Small Assassin by Ray Bradbury. It would often note here if it had been published under any pseudonyms. It looks like we've got a November 1946 as the date recorded for it. Type is short fiction. It does have a web page on Wikipedia, which I have open, and we'll pop to that in a second. Published in English, first published in Dime Mystery Magazine in November of 46. The total synopsis: a new mother develops a negative reaction to her infant. I think that synopsis is roughly equivalent to a TV listing synopsis of The Wizard of Oz that I once saw that said, that characterized it as a girl arrives in a strange land, murders the first person she meets, and continues to murder, and gathers together a group to go and kill again. It's accurate. It just doesn't tell you anything about the story, like what the story really is like. And so... Hi, Pretty Witchery! So yeah, it's like, yeah, these tags: infants, motherhood, horror, contemporary, female protagonist, into movie. I guess it's been turned into a movie. Not super helpful, but accurate, as I understand. User rating 8.29 with 7 votes. I have not voted. There are translations. It looks like French, Swedish, Italian, German, Portuguese, Finnish, Serbian, Bulgarian, Hungarian. Sorry, the 1966 one here is just called Baby. Interesting. And then it lists instances of publication. So this is similar in some ways to IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, or IBDB, the Internet Broadway Database, where it's going to be pretty good about listing things, but it's also in this case at least, essentially a wiki database. It relies on the public to fill in the information. So you register for it the same way that you would with like a Wikipedia, to be able to edit, and you can add stuff to it. And then there are like moderators for it that will confirm the entry before letting it get published. And anyway, so it might not have everything is all I was trying to say there. But so Dime Mystery Magazine, November 1946, was the first publication. We do not have any issues of Dime Mystery Magazine as far as I could tell. But we do have a copy of the story that was published in Suspense Magazine. But you can see this has been published over and over and over again, in things like Best Tales of Terror. So clearly something that people resonated with. Why German? Why that? Why German? Why that title? I don't know. That's the only German one, and the title is Baby. I mean, maybe that's just the way it was entered here, because it looks like the actual publication in German is Gefahrten der Nacht. Or is that... No, that's what it was published in. Yeah, the title of the story in the German magazine, the German anthology Gefahrten der Nacht, is just Baby. Anyway. Quickly, the Wikipedia article for The Small Assassin short story. I'm not going to go too in-depth on the plot because we're going to read the story itself. But The Small Assassin is a short story by American author Ray Bradbury, first published in November 1946 issue of Dime Mystery, collected in Bradbury's anthology Dark Carnival, and later collected in the anthologies The October Country, The Autumn People, The Small Assassin, The Stories of Ray Bradbury, and The Vintage Bradbury. David and Alice Lieber are a happily married couple living in Los Angeles. But when Alice gives birth to a healthy baby boy, she fears the baby is somehow abnormal and will kill her. That's as far as we're going to go into the plot. But adaptations in other media. Adapted by the EC comic book Shock Suspense Stories in 1953. Adapted as an episode of the television series The Ray Bradbury Theater in 1988. And another film adaptation was released in 2007. It doesn't say like anything more about that, so that's interesting. There is a little article here on Mental Floss from 2001 by April Snellings. 5 Terrifying Stories by Ray Bradbury. And so we're not going to look at most of it, but we'll look at item 3 here. First published in the November 1946 issue of Dime Mystery Magazine, this horror anthology staple might be read as a tragic tale of postpartum depression, until it's revealed that Alice Lieber, a young woman who has just given birth to her first child, is right, and her baby does in fact want to murder her. The story was adapted by horror comics legend Al Feldstein and illustrator George Evans in a 1952 issue of Shock Suspense Stories, and later as an episode of HBO's The Ray Bradbury Theater. According to Entertainment Weekly, Joss Whedon drew inspiration from The Small Assassin when he wrote Avengers: Age of Ultron. So who knows? That is at this point what? That's a citation of at least a secondary source. Yeah, Sterling, you used this for the episode, and I saw it in your in the folder of stuff, and I was like, there's no reason I shouldn't share that with people. So that's all I know about it. Like, I've not read this one before. It sounds to me a little bit like just touching on it. It reminds me of Rosemary's Baby, except it would have said if it had been adapted into Rosemary's Baby. So I expect it not to be Rosemary's Baby. I don't off the top of my head know. I think Rosemary's Baby is its own story. So but that's where my mind goes with it. Anyway. Hi, Puddle Glum! Welcome. It's good to see you. We are taking a look at some Ray Bradbury today, as we end the month with a look at our speculative fiction collection. And so we have here the spring 1951 issue of Suspense Magazine. I can zoom. Yeah, Puddle Glum. I totally understand not being able to stick around, but yeah, it'll be on VOD. So I gave myself different levels of zoom. I think this one's good for now. Science fiction, mystery, crime, fantasy, high tension stories. Cost 35 cents. And lists here, let's see, John Dixon Carr, Honeymoon Terror, Ray Bradbury, Small Assassin, William Tenn, The Quick and the Bomb, A.B. Schifrin, A Most Amazing Murder, and John Guerin, Faces Turned Against Him, plus other startling suspense stories by Theodore Sturgeon, S. Fowler Wright, James A. Kirsch, Peter Phillips, William Hope Hodgson, Alex Samelman, John Chapman, and Oliver Sari. They fit a lot of content onto that cover. Surprisingly, like that is a lot of content to go on the cover. Okay. Well, let's look at the back cover. I don't know. It's an advertisement, of course. What do you put on the back of a magazine? But at least it's a relevant advertisement. Buy 6 books. All 6 of these top mystery bestsellers. I doubt that you could mail in this postcard and actually, A, get it there with 4 cents postage. B, have that postage paid by Detective Book Club. And C, actually get the 6 books. Because I doubt Detective Book Club is still at that address. All right. Okay, let's do it. What have we got? Suspense, the high tension magazine. Inspired by the CBS radio and television program series Suspense. Say what now? I am unfamiliar. Let's learn. because that's sort of the name of the game here. Let's learn. Okay, we're gonna head on over to IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, which also includes television. But you know what? We're gonna ask you to. Well, I was gonna mute, but it won't let me do it yet. So, suspense. What? CBS radio and television program series. This was published in 51, so I'm assuming this will be it. Live plays featuring people who were in dangerous and threatening situations. Nominated for 1 Primetime Emmy, and it won for Gore Vidal for Best Episode in a TV Series. Wait. Oh, that was... Sorry. It won in 1955 an Edgar Allan Poe Award. Gore Vidal won Best Episode in a TV Series for the episode Smoke. It was nominated for Best Mystery Action or Adventure Program in the 1954 Primetime Emmys. Huh. It's interesting. I did not know that this magazine was inspired by a television show. That's interesting to me. I've not seen this show. Uh, 262 episodes. That seems very... I guess it ran from 49 to 54. Half-hour episodes. Huh. If anybody likes suspense, might be worth checking out that old TV show. Although I will say, historical content, probably. I mean, not even probably. I'm sure it has historical content. Anyway. Science fiction. The Deathless Ones by John Chapman and Oliver Sari. Obviously Suicide by S. Fowler Wright. The Quick and the Bomb by William Tenn. A Most Amazing Murder by A.B. Schifrin. Honeymoon Terror by John Dixon Carr. The Eyewitness Who Wouldn't See, James A. Kirsch. Jenny with the Light Brown Cure, Alexander Samelman. Ghost of a Chance by Theodore Sturgeon. Voice in the Night by William Hope Hodgson. Small Assassin by Ray Bradbury. She Didn't Bounce by Peter Phillips. Faces Turned Against Him by John Gearson. Published by Tom Farrell. Okay, cool. Well, let's take a look at the story. Page 52. Is anybody familiar with this story? Or is this going to be new for everybody? It's definitely going to be new for me. Macabre masterpiece. Woman's womb or woman's mind. Which has spawned this monster? Though faced by double death, even the doctor could not be sure. Okay. You're aware of it, but don't think you've ever read it before? Small Assassin, Ray Bradbury. I'm struggling right now to think, like, I'm familiar with Bradbury. I'm not 100% certain what Bradbury I've actually read. Fahrenheit 451. I may also have read The Illustrated Man, but I've not read The Martian Chronicles, surprisingly. Something Wicked This Way Comes, I'm familiar with. He wrote and consulted on screenplays and television scripts, including Moby Dick and It Came from Outer Space. Interesting. I was not aware of that. But yeah, the thing that I'm most familiar with of his is Fahrenheit 451. So let us begin. Actually, let me see what zoom level I want. I might go here, then I won't have to shift it as much. I'll still have to shift it some, but I won't have to shift it around as much. And it's legible for me. I can read it. I don't have a shock absorber for the camera yet, and so the less I touch the table, the less it will bounce. I think this is why I picked this one, because of Fahrenheit 451. That makes sense, Sterling. I didn't know. I was like, I don't know why you picked it, but that doesn't matter. It's part of the collection, so you could just walk and pick something up off of the shelf at random. And it'd be part of the collection, and we could look at it and probably have a decent episode. Ancient and honorable in all the arts is the cult of the weird, and generally nurtured in fiction by traditionalists. Such authors favor beloved but worn formulas, relying on characters and settings less eerie in themselves than in the fact that over the ages they have become symbols of eeriness. Graveyards, ghosts, Frankensteins, and black cats. Ray forsakes such props. His fresh tales do not merely gel, but genuinely curdle. They flow unforced from the milieu all around us, rendered all the more horrible because, so to speak, they are out in broad daylight. So though barely 30, Ray already ranks among the high priests of the awful. Published originally in that discoverer of so many distinguished weird tales, his work has since appeared in Harper's, Collier's, American Mercury, Charm, and many other places, including several distinguished best collections. Small Assassin. Just when the idea occurred to her that she was being murdered, she could not tell. There had been little subtle signs, little suspicions for the past month, things as deep as sea tides in her, like looking at a perfectly calm stretch of cerulean water and liking it and wanting to bathe in it, and finding, just as the tide takes your body into it, that monsters dwell just under the surface, things unseen, bloated, many-armed, sharp-finned, malignant, and inescapable. A room floated around her in an effluvium of hysteria. Sharp instruments hovered, and there were voices and people in sterile white masks. My name, she thought. My name. What is it? Alice Lieber. It came to her, David Lieber's wife. But it gave her no comfort. She was alone with these silent, whispering white people, and there was great pain and nausea and death fear in her. I am being murdered before their eyes. These doctors, these nurses don't realize. David doesn't know. Nobody knows except me and the killer. Small Assassin, the little murderer. I am dying, and I can't tell them how. They'd laugh and call me one in delirium. They'll see the murderer and hold him and like him, and they won't think him responsible for my death. Here I am, in front of God and man, dying, and there is no one to believe my story. Everyone to doubt me, comfort me with lies, bury me in ignorance, Mourn me and salvage my murderer. Where is David? She wondered. In the outer room, smoking one cigarette after another, listening to the long tickings of the very slow clock. Sweat exploded from all her body at once, and with it, a crying and agonizing. Now, now! Try to kill me, she screamed. Try, but I won't die! I won't! There was a hollow in her, a vacuity. Suddenly, there was no pain. Exhaustion, blackness. It was over. It was all over. Oh, God! She plummeted rapidly down and struck against a black nothingness, which gave way to another nothing, and another nothing, and another, and still another. Footsteps. Gentle, approaching footsteps. The sound of people trying to be quiet. Far away, a voice said, "She's asleep, don't disturb her." The odor, an odor of tweeds, a pipe, certain shaving lotion. She knew David was standing over her, and beyond him the immaculate odor of Dr. Jeffers. She did not open her eyes. "I'm awake," she said quietly. It was a surprise, a relief to be able to speak, to not be dead. "Alice," someone said, and it was David, beyond her closed eyes, his hands holding one of her tired ones. "Would you like to meet the murderer, David?" she thought. "That's who you're here to see now, aren't you?" David stood over her. She opened her eyes. The room came into focus. Moving a weak hand, she pulled aside a coverlet. The murderer looked up at David Lieber with a small, red-faced, blue-eyed calm. Its eyes were deep and sparkling. "Why," cried David Lieber, smiling, "why, he's a fine boy! Why, he's a fine baby!" Dr. Jeffers was waiting for David Lieber the day he showed up at the hospital to take his wife and new child home. He motioned Lieber into a chair in his office, gave him a cigar, lit one for himself, sat on the edge of his desk, puffing solemnly. Then he cleared his throat, looking David Lieber straight in the eye, and said, "Your wife doesn't like your child, Dave. Or doesn't like her child, Dave." "What?" "It's been a hard thing for her, the whole thing. She'll need a lot of love in this next year." I didn't say much at the time, but she was hysterical in the delivery room. The strange things she said. Now, this may be simply a thing we can clear up with one or two questions. He sucked on his cigar. "Is this child a wanted child, Dave?" "Yes. It was planned. We planned it together. Alice was so happy. A year ago when... that makes it more difficult. Because if the child was unplanned, it would be a simple case of a mother who hates the idea of motherhood. That doesn't fit Alice." Dr. Jeffers took his cigar from his lips, rubbed his hand across his jaw. "It must be something else then. Perhaps something buried in her childhood that's coming out now. Or it might be the simple temporary doubt and distrust of any mother who's gone through the unusual pain and near death that Alice has. If so, then a little time should heal that. But if things don't get along, the three of you drop in on me. I'm always glad to see old friends, eh? Here, take another cigar along for the baby." "I'm sorry, what? Take a cigar for the baby?" It is 1951, I suppose. I still don't think they gave cigars to babies in 1951. But it was a bright spring afternoon. Their car hummed along wide, tree-lined boulevards. The gutter is a little difficult to see here, so let's see what I can do. Blue sky, flowers, a warm wind. Dave talked a lot. He lit his cigar, talked some more. Alice answered directly, softly, relaxing a bit more as the trip progressed. But she held the baby not tightly enough or motherly enough to satisfy the queer ache in Dave's mind. She seemed to be carrying nearly a porcelain figurine. He tried joviality. "What'll we name him?" he asked. Alice Lieber watched green trees slide by. "Let's not name him yet," she said. "I'd rather wait until we get an exceptional name for him. Don't blow smoke in his face." Her sentences ran together with no distinction of tone between one or the other. Okay. I Let me try it again then. "Let's not name him yet. I'd rather wait until we get an exceptional name for him. Don't blow smoke in his face." There. Her sentences ran together with no distinction of tone between one or the other. The last statement held no motherly reproof, no interest, no irritation. She just mouthed it, and it was said. The husband, disquieted, dropped the cigar from the window. Sorry. The baby rested in the crook of its mother's arm. Shadows of sun and tree changing its face over and again. His blue eyes opened like fresh blue spring flowers. Moist noises came from the tiny pink elastic mouth. Alice gave her baby a quick glance. Her husband felt her shiver against him. "Cold?" he asked. "A chill. Better raise the window, David." It was more than a chill. He rolled the window thoughtfully up. Bit rebellious, yes. For the baby could have been like a toast rather than intending to give the cigar to the baby. That absolutely could have been that. And probably was. Supper time. David Lieber had brought the child from the nursery, propped him at a tiny bewildered angle, supported by many pillows, in a newly purchased high chair. Alice watched her knife and fork move. "He's not high chair size," she said. "Fun having him here anyway," said Lieber, feeling fine. "Everything's fun. At the office, too. Orders up my nose. If I don't watch myself, I'll make another 15,000 this year. Hey, look at Junior, will you? Drooling all down his chin." He reached over to dab at the baby's chin with his napkin. From the corner of his eye, he realized that Alice wasn't even watching. He finished the job. "I guess it wasn't very interesting," he said, back again in his food. Minor irritation rose in him, disregarding all self-argument. "But one would think a mother'd take some interest in her own child." Alice jerked her chin up. "Don't speak that way, not in front of him. Later, if you must." "Later?" he cried. In back of, what's the difference?" He quieted suddenly, swallowed. Was sorry. "All right, okay, I know how it is." After dinner, she let him carry the baby upstairs. She didn't tell him to. She let him. Coming down, he found her standing by the radio, listening to music she wasn't hearing. Her eyes were closed, her whole attitude one of wondering, self-questioning. Suddenly she was at him, against him, soft, quick, the same. Nothing different. Her lips found him, kept him. He was stunned by her. He laughed unexpectedly and deeply. Now that the baby was gone, upstairs, out of the room, she had begun to breathe again, live again. She was free. She was whispering, rapidly, endlessly. Thank you, darling, for being yourself always. Dependable, so very dependable." He had to laugh. "My father told me, 'Son, provide for your family.'" Wearily, she rested her dark, shining hair against his neck. "You've overdone it. Sometimes I wish we were just the way we were when we were first married. No responsibilities, nothing but ourselves. No babies." She took him too eagerly by the hand, a flushed strangeness in her white face, unnaturally intense. A third element's come in. Before, it was just you and me. We protected each other, and now we protect the baby, but get no protection from it. Do you understand? Lying in the hospital, I had time to think of a lot of things. The world is evil, is it? He said. Oh, camera. Yes, but laws protect us from it. And when there aren't laws, then love does the protecting. You're protected from my hurting you by my love. You're vulnerable to me, of all people, but love shields you. I feel no fear of you because love cushions all your irritations, unnatural instincts, hatreds, and immaturities. But what about the baby? It's too young to know love, or a law of love, or anything, until we teach it. In the meantime, be vulnerable to it. Vulnerable? To a baby? He held her away from him and laughed gently. Does a baby know the difference between right and wrong? She asked. No, but it'll learn. The baby is so new, so amoral, so conscience-free, she argued. She stopped. Her arms dropped from him, and she turned swiftly. Noise. What was it? Lieber looked around the room. I didn't hear. She stared at the library door. In there, she said slowly. Lieber crossed the room and opened the door and switched the library lights off and on. Not a thing, he said, and came back to her. You're warned. To bed with you, right now. Turning out the lights together, they walked quietly up the soundless hall stairs, not speaking. At the top, she apologized. My wild talk, darling. Forgive me, I'm just exhausted. He understood and said so. She paused, undecided, by the nursery door. Then she fingered the brass knob sharply, walked in. He watched her approach the crib much too carefully, looked down and stiffened, as if she had been struck in the face. David! Lieber stepped forward, reached the crib. The baby's face was bright red and very moist. The little pink mouth gestured. Bright blue eyes stared as if being strangled outward. Small red hands weaved in the air. Oh, he's just been crying, said Lieber. Has he? Alice Lieber grasped the crib railing to hold herself erect. I didn't hear him crying. The door was closed. Is that why he breathes so hard? Why his face is red? Sure. Poor little guy, crying all alone in the dark. He can sleep in our room tonight, just in case he cries. You'll spoil him, his wife said. Lieber felt her eyes follow as he rolled the crib into their bedroom. He undressed silently, sat on the edge of the bed. Suddenly, he lifted his head, swore under his breath, and snapped his fingers. Damn it! Forgot to tell you. Have to fly to Chicago Friday. Oh, David! She seemed a little lost girl. So soon? I've put this trip off for 2 months, and now it's so critical, I just have to make it. I'm afraid to be alone. We'll have a new cook here by Friday. She'll be here all the time. All you have to do is call. I'll only be away a little while. I'm afraid. I don't know of what. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. I guess I'm crazy. Just gonna drop the ableism command. Maybe. Oh, it's on a bot that I don't presently have access to, so we don't often encounter it on this stream. Fine. We'll just go with historical terms. He was in bed now. She darkened the room. He heard her walk around the bed, grow back, crisp sheets slide in. He smelled the warm woman's smell of her next to him. He said, "If you want me to wait a few days, perhaps I could." "No," she said, unconvinced. "You go. I know it's important. It's just that I keep thinking about what I said to you, or what I told you. Laws of love and protection. Love protects you from me, but the baby..." She took a breath. "What protects you from him, David?" Before he could answer, before he could tell her how silly it was, speaking of infants, she switched on the bedlight. "Look," she said, pointing. The baby lay wide awake in its crib, staring straight at him, with deep, sharp blue eyes. The lights went out again. She trembled against him. "It's not nice being afraid of the thing you birthed." Her whisper lowered, became harsh, fierce, swift. "He tried to kill me. He lies there, listens to us talking, waiting for you to go away so he can try to kill me again. I swear it." Sobs broke from her. "Please," he kept saying, soothing her. Stop it, please." She cried in the dark for a long time. Very late, she relaxed, shakingly, against him. Her breathing came soft, warm, regular. Her body twitched its worn reflexes, and she slept. He drowsed. Just before his eyes lidded wearily down, sinking into the deep sleep tides, he heard a strange little sound of awareness and awakeness in the room. The sound of moist, small, pinkly elastic lips. The baby. And then sleep. Yeah, I'm not sure that counts as soothing, Dave. In the morning, the sun blazed. Alice smiled. David Lieber dangled his watch over the crib. "See, baby? Something bright, something pretty." Sure, something bright, something pretty." Alice smiled. She told him to go ahead, fly to Chicago. She'd try to be a brave girl, no need to worry. The airplane went east with Lieber. There was a lot of sky, a lot of sun and clouds, and then Chicago came running over the horizon. Lieber dropped into the rush of ordering, planning, banqueting, making the rounds, telephoning, arguing in conference, downing coffee and scalding gulps between times. But he wrote letters each day and sent telegrams that said brief, nice, direct things to Alice and Baby. On the evening of his 6th day away, he received the long-distance call. Los Angeles. "Alice?" "No, Dave. This is Jeffers." "Doctor!" "Hold on to yourself, son. Alice is sick. You'd better get the next plane home. It's pneumonia. I'll do everything I can, boy. If only it wasn't so soon after the baby. She needs strength." Lieber dropped the phone into its cradle. The hotel room blurred and fell apart. "Alice," he said blindly, starting for the door. The airplane went west, and California came up. And to Lieber, home, came a vibratingly... and... Wait, what? Okay, sorry. I totally stumbled there. Let me start that paragraph again. The airplane went west, and California came up. And to Lieber, home, came a vibratingly sudden materialization of Alice lying in bed, Dr. Jeffers standing in the sunlight at a window, and the reality of Lieber feeling his feet walking slowly, becoming more real and more real until, when he reached her bed, everything was whole, intact, a reality. Nobody spoke. Alice smiled faintly. Jeffers talked, but only a little of it got through to David. "Your wife's too good a mother, son. She worried more about your baby than herself." A muscle in Alice's cheek flattened out, taut. Then Alice began to talk. She talked like a mother should now. Did she? Wasn't there a trace of anger, fear, repulsion in her voice? The baby wouldn't sleep, said Alice. I thought he was sick. He just lay in his crib staring. Late night he'd cry, loud. He cried all night and all night. I couldn't quiet him. I couldn't sleep. This seems like a take on changeling mythology, particularly similar to stories about changelings replacing babies or mothers after birth. But I sort of was having that same thought that so far I'm getting that sort of vibe. It does remind me of the changeling mythology and babies just being replaced at birth. Dr. Jeffers nodded. Tired herself right into pneumonia. But she's full of sulfa now, and she's on the safe side. Lieber felt ill. The baby, what about him? Chipper as ever, healthy as a cock. Thanks, doctor. The doctor took leave, walked down the stairs, opened the front door faintly, and was gone. Lieber listened to him go. David. He turned to her, whispered. It was the baby again, she said. I tried to lie to myself, convince myself I'm a fool, but the baby knew I was weak from the hospital, so he cried all night, and when he was crying, he'd be too quiet, and when he wasn't crying, he'd be too quiet. If I switched the light on, he'd be there, staring. Lieber jerked inside. He remembered seeing the baby, awake in the dark himself. Awake very late at night when babies should sleep. He pushed it aside. It was crazy. Alice went on. I was going to kill the baby. Yes, I was. When you'd been gone only an hour on your trip, I went to his room and put my hands about his neck, and I stood there for a long time, thinking, afraid. Then I put the covers up over his face and turned him over on his face and pressed him down and left him that way and ran out of the room. He tried to stop her. No, let me finish, she said hoarsely, looking at the wall. When I left his room, I thought, it's simple. Babies die every day of smothering. No one will ever know. When I came back to see him dead, David, he was alive. Yeah, alive, turned over on his back, alive and smiling and breathing. And I couldn't touch him again after that. Perhaps the cook tended to him. I don't know. All I know is that his crying kept me awake. And I thought all through the night. And I walked around the rooms, and now I'm sick. She was almost finished now. The baby lies there and thinks of ways to kill me. She was through. She collapsed inward on herself and finally slept. David Lieber stood for a long while over her. His brain was frozen in his head. Not a cell of it stirred. The next morning, there was only one thing to do. He walked into Dr. Jeffers' office and told him the whole thing, and listened to Jeffers' tolerant replies. Let's take this thing slowly, son. It's quite natural for mothers to hate their children sometimes. We have a label for it. Ambivalence. The ability to hate while loving. Lovers hate each other frequently. Children detest their mothers. Lieber interrupted. I never hated my mother. You won't admit it naturally. People hate admitting hatred for loved ones. So, Alice hates her baby. The best way to put it is that she has an obsession. She's gone a step further than plain ordinary ambivalence. She blames the child for her near death and her pneumonia. She's projecting her troubles, blaming them on the handiest object she can use as a source of blame. We all do it. We stumble into a chair and curse the furniture, not our own clumsiness. We miss a golf stroke and damn the turf or our club. All I can tell you is what I told you before. Find little ways of showing your affection. Find ways of showing her how harmless and innocent the child is. After a while, she'll settle down and begin to love the kid. If she doesn't come around in the next month or so, ask me and I'll recommend a good psychiatrist. Go on along now and take that look off your face. When summer came, things seemed to settle. It became easy. Lieber never forgot to be thoughtful of his wife. She in turn took long walks, gained strength. She rarely burst out emotionally anymore. But on one certain midnight, when a sudden summer wind swept around the house, shaking the trees like so many shining tambourines, Alice wakened, trembling, and slid over into her husband's arms. She said, "Something's here in the room watching us." He switched on the light. "Dreaming again," he said. "You're better, though. Haven't been scared for a long time." She sighed as he clicked off the light again. He held her, considering what a sweet, weird creature she was. Then he heard the bedroom door sway open a few inches. There was nobody at the door. No reason for it to come open. The wind had died. He waited. It seemed like an hour he lay silently in the dark. Then, far away, wailing like some meteor, dying in the vast inky gulf of space, the baby began to cry in his nursery. It was a small, lonely sound in the middle of the dark, and the breathing of this woman in his arms and the wind beginning to sweep through the trees again. It was a small, lonely sound in the middle of the dark, and the breathing of this woman in his arms and the wind beginning to sweep through the trees again. Lieber counted to 50. The crying continued. Finally, carefully, disengaging Alice's grip, he slipped from bed, put on his slippers, tiptoed out of the room. He'd go downstairs, he thought tiredly, and fix some warm milk, and the blackness dropped out from under him. His foot slipped and plunged into nothingness. He thrust his hands out, caught frantically at the railing. His body stopped falling. He cursed. Something soft caused his feet to slip. It rustled and thumped. Down a few steps and stopped. His head rang. His heart hammered at the base of his throat, thick and shot with pain. Why do people leave things strewn about a house? He groped with his fingers for the object that had almost spilled him headlong down the stairs. His hand froze, startled. His breath went in. The thing he held in his hand was a toy. A large, cumbersome, patchwork doll he had bought as a joke for baby. Alice drove him to work the next day. She slowed the car halfway downtown, to the curb, and stopped it. Then she turned on the seat and looked at her husband. "I want to go away on a vacation. I don't know if you can make it now, darling, but if not, please let me go alone. We can get someone to take care of the baby, I'm sure. I just have to get away. I thought I was growing out of this feeling, but I'm not. I can't stand being in the room with him. He looks up at me as if he hates me too. I want to get away before something happens." He got out on his side of the car, came around, motioned to her to move over, got in. The only thing you're going to do is see a good psychiatrist. If he suggests a vacation, well, okay. But this can't go on. My stomach's in knots all the time. He started the car. "I'll drive." Her head was down. She was trying to keep back tears. She looked up when they reached his office building. All right. Make the appointment. I'll go talk to anyone you want, David." He stood on the curb, watching her drive off, the wind taking hold of her long, dark, shining hair. Upstairs, a minute later, he phoned Jeffers, got an appointment arranged with a reliable psychiatrist. That was that. The day's work went uneasily. Things seemed to tangle, and he kept seeing Alice all the time, mixed into everything he looked at. So much of her fear had come over into him. She actually had him convinced that the child was somewhat unnatural. At the end of the day, he was all exhaustion and nothing else. His head throbbed. He was very willing to go home. On the way down in the elevator, he wondered, what if I told Alice about that toy I stumbled over on the stairs. Lord, that sent her off into hysterics. No, I won't ever tell her. After all, it was just one of those accidents. Daylight lingered in the sky as he drove home in a taxi. In front of his Brentwood home, he paid the driver and walked slowly up the cement walk, enjoying the light that was still in the sky. The white colonial front to the house looked unnaturally silent and uninhabited. And then, quietly, he remembered that this was Thursday and the cook's day off, and he and Alice would have to scriven for themselves, or else eat on the strip somewhere. He took a deep breath of air. Traffic moved on the boulevard a block away. He turned the key in the door. He stepped in, put his hat on the chair with his briefcase, started to shrug out of his coat, then looked up. Late sunlight streamed down the stairwell from the window at the top of the house. Where the sunlight landed, it took on the bright color of the patchwork doll, still sprawled in a grotesque angle at the bottom of the stairs. But he paid no attention to the patchwork doll. He could only look and not move, and look again at Alice. Alice lay in a broken, grotesque, pallid gesturing and angling of her thin body. She was lying at the bottom of the stairs. Alice was dead. The house remained quiet, except for the sound of his heart. She was dead. He held her head in his hands. He felt of her fingers. He held her body, but she wouldn't live. He said her name out loud many times, and he tried once again, by holding her to him, to give her back some of the warmth she had lost. But that didn't help. He stood up. He must have made a phone call he didn't remember. He found himself suddenly upstairs. He opened the nursery door and walked inside and stared blankly at the crib. His stomach was sick. He couldn't see very well. The baby's eyes were closed, but his face was red, moist with perspiration, as if he'd been crying long and hard. "She's dead," said Lieber to the baby. "She's dead." And he started laughing. He was still laughing when Dr. Jeffers walked in and slapped him again and again across his cheeks. "Snap out of it. Pull yourself together, son." "She fell down the stairs, doctor. She tripped on a patchwork doll and fell. I almost slipped on it the other night myself, and now..." The doctor shook him. Doc, said Lieber hazily. "Funny thing. Funny. I finally thought of a name for the baby." The doctor said nothing. Lieber put his head back in his trembling hands and spoke the words, "I'm going to have him christened next Sunday. Know what I'm going to give him? Know what name I'm going to give him? I'm going to call him Lucifer." It was 11 at night. A lot of strange people had come and gone through the house, taking the essential flame with them. Alice. David Lieber sat across from the doctor in the library. "Alice wasn't crazy," he said slowly. "She had good reason to fear the baby." Jeffers exhaled. "Now you're following in her pattern. She blamed the child for her sickness. Now you blame it for her death. She stumbled on a toy, remember that. You can't blame the child." "You mean Lucifer?" "Stop calling him Lucifer." Lieber shook his head. "Alice heard things at night, as if someone spied on us. You want to know what those noises were, doctor? I'll tell you. They were made by the baby. Yes, my son. 4 months old, creeping around the dark halls at night, listening to us talk. Listening to every word." He held to the sides of the chair. "And if I turned the lights on, a baby is a small object. It can conveniently hide behind furniture, a door, against a wall, below eye level. I want you to stop this, demanded Jeffers. Let me say what I think, or I'll go crazy. When I went to Chicago, who was it kept Alice awake, tiring her, weakening her into pneumonia? The baby. And when Alice didn't die, then he tried killing me. It was simple. Leave a toy doll on the stairs, then cry in the night until your father rouses up, tired of listening to you cry, and goes downstairs to fetch you warm milk and stumbles. A crude trick, but effective. It didn't get me, but it killed Alice quite dead. David Lieber stopped long enough to light a cigarette. He should have caught on. I'd turn on the lights in the middle of the night, many nights, and the baby'd be lying there, eyes wide. Most babies sleep constantly, all the time. Not this one. He stayed awake, thinking. Babies don't think, countered Jeffers. He stayed awake doing whatever he could do with his brain then. What the hell do we know about a baby's brain? He had every reason to hate Alice. She suspected him for what he was, certainly not a normal child. Lieber leaned toward the doctor, tiredly. It all ties up. So a few babies out of all the millions are born instantaneously able to move, see, hear, think. Many insects are self-sufficient when born. In a few days, most mammals and birds are adjusted. Little man children take years to speak, faltering around on rubbery legs. But suppose one child in a million is strange, born perfectly aware, able to think instinctively. Wouldn't it be a perfect setup? A perfect blind for anything the baby might want to do? He could pretend to be ordinary, weak, crying, ignorant. Just a little expenditure of energy, he could crawl about a darkened house, listening. And how easy to place obstacles at the top of stairs. How easy to cry all night and tire a mother into pneumonia. How easy, right at birth, to be so close to the mother that a few deft maneuvers might cause peritonitis. For God's sake! Jeffers was on his feet. That's a repulsive thing to say. It's a repulsive thing I'm speaking of. How many mothers have died at the birth of their children? How many have suckled strange little improbabilities who caused death one way or another? Strange, red little creatures with brains that function in a scarlet darkness we can't even guess at. Elemental little brains, a swarm with racial memory and hatred and raw cruelty. I ask you, Doctor, what is there in the world more selfish than a baby? Nothing. Nothing is so self-centered, unsocial, selfish. Nothing. Jeffers scowled and shook his head helplessly. Lieber dropped his cigarette down weakly. I'm not claiming any great strength for the child, just enough to listen all the time. Just enough to cry late at night. That's enough. More than enough. Jeffers tried ridicule. Call it murder then. And murder must have a motivation. Name a motivation for the child. Lieber was ready with the answer. What is more at peace, more dreamfully happy, content, at ease, at rest, fed, comforted, unbothered, than an unborn child? Nothing. It floats in a sleepy, dark swirl of timeless wonder and warm nourishment and silence. All is an enclosed dream. Then suddenly, it is asked to give up its birth, is forced to vacate, propelled out into a noisy, uncaring, selfish, swift, and merciless world to hunt, to feed from the hunting, to seek after a vanishing love that once was its unquestionable right, to meet confusion instead of inner silence and conservative slumber. And the newborn resents it. Resents it with all the soft, small fibers of its miniature body. Resents the raw, cold air, the huge spaces, the sudden departure from familiar things. And who is responsible for this disenchantment, this rude breakage of the spell? The mother. And so the new child has someone to hate, and hate with all the tiny fabric of its mind. The mother has cast it out, rejected it, and the father is no better. Kill him, too. He's responsible in his way. Jeffers interrupted. If what you say is true, then every woman in the world would have to look on her newborn as something to dread, something to shudder at. And why not? Hasn't the child a perfect alibi? He has 1,000 years of accepted medical belief to protect him. By all natural accounts, he is helpless, not responsible. The child is born hating. And things grow worse instead of better. At first, the baby gets a certain amount of attention and mothering. But then, as time passes, things change. When very new, a baby has great power. Power to make parents do silly things when it cries or sneezes, jump when it makes a noise. As the months pass, the baby feels even that little power slipping rapidly, forever away from it, never to return. Why shouldn't it grasp for all the power it can have? Why shouldn't it jockey for position? Well, it has all the advantages. In later years, it would be too late to express its hatred. Now would be the time to strike. Lieber's voice was very soft, very low. My little baby boy, lying in his crib nights, his face moist and red and out of breath from crying? No, from climbing tediously, achingly slow out of his crib, from crawling long distances through darkened hallways. My little boy baby. I want to kill him. The doctor handed him a water glass and some pills. You're not killing anyone. You're going to sleep for 24 hours. Sleep will change your mind. Take this. Lieber drank down the pills and let himself be led upstairs to his bedroom crying, and felt himself being put to bed. The next morning, Dr. Jeffers drove up to the Lieber house. It was a good morning, and he was here to tell Lieber to get out into the country for a rest. Lieber would still be asleep upstairs. Jeffers had given him enough sedative to knock him out for at least 15 hours. He rang the doorbell. No answer. The servant hadn't returned. Too early. Jeffers tried the front door, found it open, stepped in, put his medical kit on the nearest chair. Something white moved out of view at the top of the stairs. Just a suggestion of a movement. Jeffers hardly noticed it. The odor of gas was in the house. Jeffers ran up the stairs, crashed into Lieber's room. Lieber lay on the bed, not moving, and the room billowed with gas, which hissed from a released jet at the base of the wall near the door. Jeffers twisted it off, then forced up all the windows and ran back to Lieber's body. The body was cold. It had been dead quite a few hours. Coughing violently, the doctor hurried from the room, eyes watering. Lieber hadn't turned the gas on himself. He couldn't have. Those sedatives had knocked him out. He wouldn't have wakened until noon. It wasn't suicide. Or was there the faintest possibility? Jeffers stood in the hall for 5 minutes. Then he walked to the door of the nursery. It was shut. He opened it. He walked inside and over to the crib. The crib was empty. He stood, swaying over the crib for half a minute. Then he said something to nobody in particular. The nursery door blew shut. You couldn't get back into your crib where it was safe. You didn't plan on the door blowing shut. A little thing like a slammed door can ruin the best of plans. I'll find you somewhere in the house, hiding, pretending to be something you are not. The doctor looked dazed. He put his hand to his head and smiled palely. Now I'm talking like Alice and David talked. But I can't take any chances. I'm not sure of anything. I can't take any chances. He walked downstairs, opened his medical bag upon the chair, took something out of it, and held it in his hands. Something rustled down the hall. Something very small and very quiet. Jeffers turned rapidly. He took half a dozen quick, sure steps forward into the hall. If I had to operate to bring you into this world, now I guess I can operate too. The end. Concilian, thank you. I don't know that I'm good enough to narrate audiobooks, but that was a sight reading of that story. So thank you for the bit. And Sterling, I also appreciate you saying that I read it better than your inner monologue. So, Hannah, they didn't leave a baby. Well, actually, you're right. They did. They did. I didn't catch it because I was so focused on reading, but yeah, the doctor drugged the dad and put him to rest in his bed and then left, which meant that the baby was there with no coherent adult anywhere around. I mean, in this case, we, the audience, know that the baby was fully aware and capable of murder. But generally, we're not dealing with Stewie from Family Guy, bent on murder. Who's actually taking care of this kid? There are so many problems. I know. I mean, it seems like it was initially it was the father, and then it was the cook they hired, who seems to have been the one actually caring for the kid. If anybody was caring for the kid, maybe the kid was just caring for himself because the mother was so terrified of the baby, which, I mean, baby tried to kill the father and the mother, and eventually did kill the mother, and then also killed the father, and we don't know what happens, whether the baby or the doctor wins in the end. Yes, Sterling. Um, the 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 article that you had found in oh gosh, was it Wired? Where was it? I had it open, but then I went to IMDb. Mental Floss. The article that you found in Mental Floss mentioned that Joss Whedon apparently, like according to Entertainment Weekly, Joss Whedon drew inspiration from this story for Avengers: Age of Ultron. I'm trying to think back on Age of Ultron now, and I could sort of loosely see it, like the new creature, the baby coming into the world, and fully aware and murderous. I could see it. Stark accidentally made Ultron, and Ultron tried to kill the Avengers. Still think that they all would have been fine if they respected and cared for the baby. Probably so. It's an interesting tale, and the introduction to the blurb about the small assassin in the Mental Floss article was like, yeah, it reads like a tragic tale of postpartum depression, until you realize that the child actually does want to murder its parents. And again, like I still feel like there's a lot of sort of crossover parallel between this and Rosemary's Baby. More Omen vibes. I could see that. I'm looking. I wanted to see if anybody else, and it apparently is not something that people immediately, okay, so let me look then at Rosemary's Baby, because that's what my brain is thinking of. It's changeling mythology as an excuse for ableism. Long history of stories like it. Ooh, that's worth thinking through. Changeling mythology as an excuse for ableism. So the ableism in this case being the assumption that the mother, it's all in her head, and basically dismissing postpartum. I'm trying to think of all the possible layers of ableism that would be present. I mean, both times, like, and I dropped historical terms just because I realized that my automated note about ableist language runs on a bot that I only have at home, and so it wasn't there, and I couldn't drop the command in. But it was the use of the C word, the crazy word, a couple of times. Oh, and now we have a raid by 16-Bit Eric. Hello, Eric. Hello, Whimsies. Welcome in, everybody, from the League of Whimsy. Hey, no worries. But yeah, welcome, everybody. Oh, Punkelnix, thank you so much for the follow. Hi, Shadows of Life. Hi, Eric. Thank you for dropping the shout out. If anybody's here who does not follow 16-Bit Eric, you should. Eric is an amazing storyteller who does the most wonderful streams, and it's honestly just like the League of Whimsy is one of the best places to hang out ever. It's a super great community. And yeah. Oh gosh, everybody's here and it's so nice. And hi. Hi Blue Rooster, and hi Hannah, and welcome back, Pretty Witchery, and yes, Sword Portico. It is good to see you again. So we have been don't threaten me with a good time. We took a look today at Ray Bradbury's Small Assassin. I actually read the entire short story, and I was just beginning to try and figure out, based on my not great memory all the time, it was reminding me, it was making me think of Rosemary's Baby, and so now I was trying to look and see what I could figure out about the differences between the two stories. Oh gosh, and Lord Portico, thank you for gifting us up to Pretty Witchery. That is so kind. Okay, so Rosemary's Baby was 1967, written by Ira Levin. And she's pregnant, but then she has a difficult pregnancy. And then it goes off into a satanic coven. So yeah, very different sort of ending. But this one, the Small Assassin, yeah, the only things that my brain went to as we were looking at it, there were a couple of things. So there was it brought to mind for me Stewie Griffin from Family Guy, because the whole the conceit of the story involves essentially the baby being like fully alert and aware and able to plot and able to secretly like climb out of its crib and get around and stalk the parents and understand what they're saying, and like from the moment of birth. And like the first murder attempt is during the birth. That's the first time the child attempts to murder its mother. So of course I thought of Stewie Griffin, who is supposed to be this infant, but who walks around and talks. And I'm really curious now. Like, I've never really looked into like the inspiration for a lot of Family Guy stuff because it's just a little it's comedy and it's supposed to be over the top, and it's, but I wonder if Stewie Griffin, if there was some inspiration there from The Small Assassin. I find it interesting that that article in Mental Floss noted that Joss Whedon drew inspiration from it for Age of Ultron. As I think that's especially interesting to me because that information never made its way into the Wikipedia article about the story, which tells me that there was not a sufficient citation to be able to back it up to have it on Wikipedia. So I think I would classify that as apocryphal. Like, the article in Mental Floss quotes, or doesn't even quote, it says Entertainment Weekly. It says, according to Entertainment Weekly, Joss Whedon used it as inspiration for Age of Ultron, which is a couple of layers removed. And I would be very curious to see if Joss Whedon is ever actually quoted or has ever said publicly that it was part of the inspiration. But honestly, really, really, really interesting story. And so we didn't have the original magazine that it was published in, but we did have Suspense, which totally worth it. I actually have a second issue of Suspense here. We've sort of looked at this one, but we can peruse the second one with the time that we've got left. Because there were two in the box. So this is summer of 1951. And what do we have? We have F. Hugh Herbert. That's really difficult to say and almost comes out sounding rude. F. Hugh Herbert. Perfectly Calm Murder. George Simon, Elusive Witness. John Wyndham, Operation Peep. Larry Holden, Criminal at Large. Nathaniel Whale, Blood Will Tell. And then also stories by Ambrose Bierce, John Krill, John Price, Thomas Gilchrist, Richard Lewis, and others. So let's see. I don't know. I know nothing about this one. I have never even opened this one. So let's see what we got. For anybody that joined with the raid, it was quite interesting to note that Suspense Magazine. Oh gosh, wow. I had not noted. The one that had The Small Assassin in it was the very first issue. Because this is volume 1, number 2. But this magazine was apparently inspired by the CBS radio and television program series Suspense. That ran for over 200 episodes, apparently. I was not aware of it. But let's see if there's anything we recognize here. Thomas Gilchrist, Survival, Blood Will Tell, The Face, Witness. Evil is the Night. Pardon my terror. Criminal at Large, Fatal Mistake. Black Death by John Krill. Maiden Beware by Richard Lewis. A Horseman in the Sky by Ambrose Bierce. Pennywise, Fate Foolish by Mary Elizabeth Councilman. The Perfectly Calm Murder by F. Hugh Herbert. Yeah, they have, so they're all, the whole focus of this magazine is suspense. Not surprising because the title is Suspense. And Suspense Magazine. Oh, we didn't look at that. I think maybe I didn't. Let me see if I can find an entry for it in the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. All right. Suspense. U.S. Digest-sized magazine published by Farrell Publishing Company, edited by Theodore Irwin. Had 4 quarterly issues, so that was the schedule that it was published on. Spring. Oh, no, it only published 4 issues. Spring 1951 to winter 1952. Suspense was based on the CBS radio series of the same name, which ran for, 945 episodes? That's more than IMDb told me. Wow. Running from 17 June 1942 to 30 September 1962. It included the script of 1 episode per issue. What? I don't see that in the table of contents. That's very interesting. Oh, Shakespeare and Bacon sounds like a great name for a dinner theater. Yeah, that seems right. I'm curious now. What is it? The novelette? What is the script? No, it's not the novelette. That's just. I'm very curious now. Because there's nothing actually like listed as being a script. But I found one. Okay. That's an interesting note that I had not discovered before. Included the script of 1 episode per issue and also contained a mixture of detective, weird, science fiction, and fantasy stories, including some reprints. The one we read today was a reprint. The authors included Theodore Sturgeon and John Wyndham. There was a new Fafford and the Grey Mouser story from Fritz Lieber. Dark Vengeance. The unusual mixing of genres may have accounted for Suspense's rapid demise. That seems like a bit of speculation rather than actual, like, because they don't specifically, but the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction operates slightly differently than, say, Wikipedia. So, let's see. So it mentioned that each issue had a script, and the table of contents really didn't indicate that, but the introduction to Maiden Beware by Richard Lewis in this issue notes, in each issue, the magazine Suspense features one of the distinguished short plays which have made broadcasting history as part of the CBS radio television program series Suspense. Maiden Beware, published below, was originally performed over the CBS network in July 1944 under the title The Black Shawl, starring Dame May Whitty. Why is that hard to say? Dame May Whitty and Maureen O'Sullivan. Numbering its audience in the millions, the CBS Suspense series has brought to perfection a new type of high-tension presentation, in harmony with modern tastes and featuring advanced concepts of entertainment. It ranks today as one of the finest dramatic programs on the air. And then, yeah, it's an actual script. But in the table of contents at the beginning, Maiden Beware is listed, isn't it? Wait, it's not even on the table of contents. Operation Peep, World Within, Blood Will Tell, Nightmare Face, Elusive Witness, Survival, Fatal Mistake, Criminal at Large, Pardon My Terror, Evil is the Night, Black Death. Oh, there it is. Maiden Beware. Yeah, it's just under the category The Macabre. And there's no indication that it's the one that is the script. So that's interesting. And even like on the cover, no indication that Maiden Beware is the one pulled from the TV show. That's just interesting to me. Like, I feel like that would be something they would want to like highlight. But yeah, this one, the fantasy story bit is Pennywise Fate Foolish by Mary Elizabeth Councilman on 72. So like it's less about specific genre as long as it's suspenseful. And yeah, this one is old, and as I opened to this page, the spine completely cracked. The glue is gone. And that's honestly not surprising. These are pulp, and they're called pulp for a reason. They were made with cheap materials and tend to fall apart. Three held stakes in this grim game, but the wanton fates meet the sports of the winners. Once voted by readers the most popular short story ever printed in Weird Tales, where it appeared under the title Three Marked Pennies, this closely knit fantasy is among the finest of the kind. Cited by the writers' magazines for excellence of plot, it has been dramatized for stage and radio and reprinted in England, France, Denmark, Norway, and Holland. Its most recent appearance was in the Reinhardt collection, The Nightshade, edited by August Derleth. So yeah, it's a mixed magazine, focused on suspense, but suspense sort of wasn't a genre, at least in the view of the time. Whoa, sorry, I meant to unzoom. Basically 1940s, 1950s pulp speculative fiction. You've got magazines that focus on horror. You've got magazines that focus on science fiction. You've got magazines that focus on weird or eerie or essentially all of these genres that are listed here: sci-fi, mystery, adventure, crime, the macabre, fantasy. Like, you have magazines for all of those things. And so having all the genres in one magazine is actually unusual. To me, it makes sense, because if you like suspenseful stories in one genre, you're probably going to like suspenseful stories in another genre. But yeah, I don't know. This one started, like, the encyclopedia article noted that the mixing of genres may have been why they only got 4 issues. I think it's probably more to do with when they started, because their first issue was spring of 1951, which is toward the end of the pulp speculative fiction era and toward the beginning of the lesbian pulp era. So, like, these kinds of stories were going out of style in pulp magazines, and really only a couple of players continue on, like the magazine Fantasy and Science Fiction or Asimov's. And the broad publishing apparatus that was publishing all of the pulp stuff, as we move through the 50s and into the 60s, it shifts away from spec fiction and into lesbian stories. So, let me look at. Coincidentally, a Tumblr you follow that's discussing the history of D&D just posted today about the 1980s adaptation of the Bard and Mauser stories as a D&D setting. Key squared, that is a very interesting coincidence. I do not actually have any clue how to pronounce FAFHRD. I'm assuming the F is silent, so Fard, but I really honestly have no idea. Unless Richard Lewis was a known name from the radio show. It's the only thing I can think of. So, I sort of had that thought as well, and I want to look at this one and see if we can tell which one here is from the show. I don't see any indication in this table of contents. Fafrid. I've heard Fafrid. Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I would probably end up trying to look up if I needed to say it reliably. But sight reading, I'm like, I think I did Fafrid and Fard both. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna look and see. I think maybe the only indication is location, because the second to last story in the second issue was the one from the show, and the second to last story in this issue is also the one from the show. So I'm guessing that's just where they would place it in the magazine, but I don't know how you would know that. There was no indication. So this time, yeah, it's got like the same introduction talking about the show. This one is Honeymoon Terror by John Dixon Carr. Numbering its audience in the millions today, the CBS radio television program series Suspense for a number of years has ranked as one of the finest dramatic programs on the air. It has brought to perfection a new type of high-tension presentation in tune with our time, in harmony with modern concepts of gripping entertainment. In each issue, the magazine Suspense will present one of the distinguished scripts which have made broadcasting history. The initial choice, Honeymoon Terror, was originally given over the CBS network in November 1943 under the title Cabin B-13, starring Margot and Philip Dorn. Yeah, it's interesting. I was not previously aware of Suspense Magazine. One of the things I learned today was how much of Ray Bradbury's work I was not aware of. Somehow, the only thing I'm definitely like before today, the only thing I really knew well was Fahrenheit 451. And I had not realized that was the only thing I really knew very well. Anyway, for anybody who came in late, if you do want to watch or listen to me reading the story, I do so with very little interruption. And you can watch the VOD on either channel immediately following. And then later this week, it'll go up on the library's YouTube channel. The only thing you've read of Bradbury was The Tattooed Man. I think it's The Illustrated Man, but alternate titles. I'm familiar with it. I don't know if I've ever read it. We are going to need to close out the day. We have hit the end of specified time for the show. The next two episodes of Archival Adventures, so the next two Wednesdays, I have guests. So Next week, I will be joined by Jenny Naert, who is a curator for the Christiansburg Institute Incorporated. And we'll be looking at material about the Christiansburg Industrial Institute, which was a school, a vocational school in the area here in Southwest Virginia. Specifically, it was founded right after the Civil War and was for African Americans. And the curriculum, I'm going to blank on the name. One second. Because I know it's quick and easy to find this piece. We like guests. The curriculum. Who was the person? Give me the history. I mean, we'll talk about it next week, but the question is just, why did my brain completely lose this name right when I needed it? I mean, honestly, that's how things go. There was heavy influence by Booker T. Washington on the curriculum of the school. It has very wide-ranging alumni. And yeah, so the curator of their museum and archives is going to join us, and we're going to look at historical documents about the Christiansburg Institute next week. And then in 2 weeks, I will be joined by none other than Sterling, who has for the past year been picking the topic of the episodes. And I have finally convinced Sterling to join me on stream for an episode. And Sterling will be joining me in 2 weeks for an episode focusing on LGBTQ plus history at Virginia Tech. So we'll be exploring some of those materials in 2 weeks. Hi, wannabe Sayuri. And then after that, we've got other things. Like, there's always more to look at. Do I remember what all of it is? But let's see. Yeah, so Christiansburg Institute with Jenny Naert next week, and then Virginia Tech LGBTQ history with Sterling Bryant the week after that. And then I think we're going to look at the Crooked Road, followed by Spec Fiction for April, which is Lost Legacy, the one that somebody mentioned when we looked at Dianetics. Somebody mentioned that it reminded them of Lost Legacy. So we're going to look at that. And then we'll finally get back to the USS Dakota at the beginning of May. We got some plans, and we'll have fun. It's been fun looking at Ray Bradbury today, and I hope it was enjoyable for everybody. Let me see where we're going to raid, because there's no reason not to bring the joy of the stream to someone else. Pretty Witchery, thank you. All right, let's see. There's the aquarium, quite often on. They have the moon jelly cam today, so that's jellyfish, which I tend to try and not force on anybody because I know at least one person who really, really doesn't like jellyfish. DC. I see a couple of options, but I know NASA was live recently, but I don't see them on anymore. I think I think we might raid someone who I don't think I've ever had the privilege of raiding before. Bye, Fludan. I think we're going to raid Mobius Tempest. They are currently live. It looks like they're doing some Guild Wars 2. Mobius is a lovely streamer who has shown up in the chat quite a few times. And also, yeah, I've met them through Twitch, and they're a lovely person. So I think we're going to pop on over there because I never get to rate them. Let the thing work. So if you would be so kind to join the raid and pop on over there and say hello. What happened to my window? Oh, it's the new raid interface threw me for a loop. I'm sorry. This is like the third week and I'm still not used to it. Anyway, if you'd be so kind to join me, say hello when we get over there. I'm sure Mobius will enjoy having some people pop in. Thank you so much for joining me today for Archival Adventures. Hopefully, I will see you again soon. And until I do, keep exploring history, everybody.